All right, let's get right into this because it's a fascinating story. We're looking at one single bank, Associated Bank, that got two report cards that are just complete opposites, one from the government and one from the community it's supposed to be serving. This is really a tale of two very different scorecards. And that brings us to the big question, the mystery at the heart of all of this. How in the world can a bank get an A+, the best possible grade from federal regulators, and at the exact same time, get what is basically a failing grade from community advocates? Let's unpack this. So first up, let's look at the official story. This is the government's take coming from the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. You'll hear it called the OCC. This is their big formal performance review of the bank from 2024. And what did they find? The final grade was outstanding. Now, just to be clear, this isn't like getting a B+. This is the highest possible rating a bank can get. According to the feds, Associated Bank is basically a star pupil. So you might be wondering, how did they get such a glowing review? Well, the OCC's report was full of praise. They were outstanding on lending, outstanding on investing. They had strong community development, innovative products, and more than 90% of their loans were made right there in their local communities. By all the official metrics, it was a home run. But, and this is a big but, that's only one side of the coin. Now, we're going to pivot to a completely different evaluation. This one is from the St. Louis Fair Housing Accountability Report. And yeah, it tells a very, very different story. You see, this community report wasn't looking at the same checklist as the regulator. It zeroed in on one critical question. Forget about income levels for a second. Is the bank's lending actually equitable when you look at it through the lens of race? And the numbers they uncovered were pretty stark. Let's just take Madison County, Illinois, for example. In 2023, just 1.5% of the bank's loans went to Black borrowers. And if you thought that was bad, just look at the county next door. In Monroe County, that number dropped to 0. Not low, 0. In an entire year of lending, not a single loan went to a Black borrower. This chart really puts it into perspective. I mean, look at that tiny little sliver for Madison County at 1.5%. Now compare that to St. Clair County right nearby at almost 15%. And this isn't just some local issue either. It's way below the bank's own national average. The difference is just dramatic. And here's the kicker. This isn't a new problem. Community groups were raising red flags about these exact issues almost a decade ago. It all led to a huge moment in 2015 when the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, announced its largest ever redlining settlement with this very bank. But despite that historic agreement, this new report basically says that when you look at the actual lending data, not much has changed. So that brings us back to our paradox: an A+ from the regulator and a big fat F from the community. How can both of these things be true at the same time? Well, the answer is actually pretty simple. They weren't taking the same test. They were measuring completely different things. See, the government's outstanding rating is all based on something called the Community Reinvestment Act, or the CRA. And here is the absolute key to understanding this whole situation. The CRA is designed to make sure banks serve low and moderate income neighborhoods. Its main focus is on economic class, not explicitly on race. This table just lays it all out perfectly. On one side, you have the OCC looking at income levels using older multi-year data. On the other side, you have the community report using the very latest data to look at racial equity. And that's it. That's how one group saw outstanding investments and the other saw persistent disparities. Two different lenses, two totally different realities. So what does this gap between the scorecards really tell us? What's the bigger picture here? Because this is about way more than just one bank's report card. At the end of the day, what this case shows is that a bank can check all the official boxes, get a perfect outstanding rating, and still be dramatically underserving minority borrowers. The CRA's focus on income can create a massive blind spot for racial disparities. It shows that even a landmark settlement doesn't guarantee results. And maybe most importantly, other banks in the same areas are doing better, which tells you this isn't just an impossible problem to solve. So where does that leave us? Well, the community report lays out a pretty clear path forward. For the bank, it says, set real measurable targets for minority lending. For the regulators, look beyond the checklist and at the spirit of that 2015 agreement. And for the community, keep using data like this to demand accountability. And that really brings us to the core of it all. captured perfectly in this one line. Passing the regulator's exam is not the same as passing the community's test. Hitting your compliance targets is one thing. Actually delivering equitable outcomes for the people you serve, that's another thing entirely. And that really leaves us with one last big question to chew on. This story shows how an official A-plus rating can hide a really deep problem. So it makes you wonder, right? If the official report cards don't always capture the full picture, what other important stories are we all missing?